You're listening to the Deerfield Public Library Podcast, August 2025. Welcome to the Deerfield Public Library Podcast. I'm Dylan Zavagno, Adult Services Coordinator at the library, and I have a co-host today, Stevie Noguchi, Adult Services Librarian here. This is a special full circle moment for both of us. It's an interview with poet, writer, and translator James Shea. James Shea's new poetry collection, Last Day of My Face, was just published at the end of June from University of Iowa Press as the winner of the Iowa Poetry Prize. The reason this is a full circle moment, well, my colleague Stevie and I realized only after years of working together that James Shea taught each of us at the same time at different schools here in Chicago over a decade ago. James Shea is currently an associate professor and director of the Creative and Professional Writing program at Hong Kong Baptist University. In addition to the excellent new poetry collection, Last Day of My Face, we have an incredible group of recent books, either by Shea alone or with collaborators. So he translated Applause for a Cloud, a collection of haiku by the Japanese poet Sayumi Kamakura, just out from Black Ocean in 2025. Shea is also the co-editor with Grant Caldwell of the Routledge Global Haiku Reader from 2023, and the translator with the writer Dorothy Tse of Moving a Stone, Selected Poems of Yam Gong from Zephyr Press in 2022, which brought the Hong Kong poet Yam Gong into English. You'll hear poems and thoughts from all of James's books, including his previous poetry collections, The Lost Novel from 2014 and Star in the Eye from 2008, both from Fence Books, and both of which made big impressions on us as young poetry students. So this is a conversation about many traditions, the tradition of haiku and translation, the New York School poets, and the tradition of James Shea, a unique voice in world poetry today. We were lucky to have this conversation in person at the library back in May, and we're so happy to be sharing it with you now. James Shea, welcome. This is a great honor. A year or so ago, my colleague Stevie Noguchi, who is here with us, hi Stevie, we were both talking and she mentioned some books that she was acquiring for the library and said, oh, you have to look at this author James Shea. He just translated this book of poetry. I said, James Shea? I took his Intro to Creative Writing class my freshman year of undergraduate school at DePaul University. I hadn't declared a major yet, and I was just overwhelmed with enthusiasm, and it made me become a poetry major. And James, you were, I think, the first person that I could talk to about the New York School poets. And I remember very clearly you teaching me how to say James Schuyler, not James Schuler, and Kenneth Koch, not Kenneth Coach. And I was obsessed with John Ashbery, still am, and you told me which books were your favorite. And then I believe it was my sophomore year, the next year, I took a haiku class about the history of haiku with you.
That's
and
right.
There's so many things I learned from that class that now have come out in some of these books of translation here and your Routledge haiku introduction. And one thing that always stuck with me was John Ashbery's own version of haiku, which follow, as you note, the actual form of haiku, which is one line, not three lines, one single line of English. So my favorite one in his poem 37 haiku is, some star or other went out and you, thank you for your book and year. So I want to say that to you now, James, because you actually have given us, 4 or 5 books that have come out in the past few years that we're celebrating, especially Last Day of My Face, your first book of poems in 10 years. The other thing I just wanted to say was right around the time I was taking classes from you, I think 2008 was when Star in My Eye came out, your first collection. Star in the Eye, I should say, right? Came out, and I was just obsessed with it and the way an eager student was, and it had all of the kind of glee and enthusiasm and like internationalism that some of the indie rock had at the time. Exclamation points, a lot of exclamation points in it. And there's haiku threaded throughout that book too. And it just meant a lot to me. It was a soundtrack to my undergraduate years. So
wow.
You probably didn't know how much
I had
an impression
no idea.
you made on me, but you did.
That's very heartening to hear. That's amazing. I came to haiku as a student in Chicago through my poetry teacher at Loyola University. I took workshops with Dean Young, who just passed away not too long ago. Yeah. And, you know, he introduced us to Basho and Isa and Buson and the New York School.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about like how these lineages get passed on, you know, one generation to another. And so that's heartening to hear that it affected you. Those Ashbery haiku, those single line haiku that he did, I think that's in A Wave, that book. Yeah. There's a little connection there with my own sort of experience with haiku, which is that I think in the 70s or 80s, he was reading these one-line translations of haiku by Hiroaki Sato, prominent translator, and even published them in a journal. And Ashbery sort of reports that he suddenly realized that, haiku is actually a single line. He was fascinated by this form, the mano stitch, and then wrote his own. Well, Sato was translating freestyle haiku or free verse haiku by Ozaki Hosai, a sort of haiku poet from flourished in the 20s, who I actually ended up translating and studying myself when I went to Japan on this fellowship after I got my MFA. My whole project was to read and translate these sort of idiosyncratic, often very short, sometimes long haiku by Ozaki Hosai, which didn't have a season word, weren't 17 syllables, but these kind of modernist experiments with the haiku form. So it's just an interesting kind of another like circular story about how, you know, writers are influenced and you know, a lot of it's through translation. And then, you know, I'm reading Ashbery and enjoying him, and then, you know, thinking about, well, what did he take out of haiku? What am I taking from haiku mediated by Ashbery? And all, you know, it just gets very interesting. Kenneth Koch, O'Hara, Ashbery, they also were into Renga for a while. Like in the early days, they would like have these Renga sessions. So it's interesting to track haiku's influence on American poetry since the 50s, when haiku started like really being embraced by the Beats and others. Richard Wright, his haiku are essentially kind of reworkings of R.H. Blythe's translations. You know, that 4-volume set of haiku translations that Blythe did. Richard Wright's haiku kind of sound more like Blythe than they do Basho, actually, or Buson. And so, again, thinking about like how influential the rhythms of a translation can be, and sometimes occluding the original in a way, what's happening in the original, but then for me, that's fine, because the translations themselves become, you know, they're also poems in their own right.
Well, that's what I felt like, and we had been talking about it before you got here, was reading all of your work together like this, which I had never done before. I read the book, obviously, when it came out, and then a couple years later, the Lost Novel. But I've never read your translations and everything together as one. And I don't know if it's in the essay for Routledge Global Haiku Reader or if it's in the intro, but you talk about how haiku needs that endnote or that footnote or that intro to kind of give you the idea of what's happening or to anchor the piece to make you understand. And I felt like reading your translation stuff and a lot of what you were seeing and working through comes through in your creative work. Like I feel like it's the footnote to your creative work. Because I saw like a lot of the season words, I feel like is a lot of the language that you use over and over again, or the cutting line or the cutting word that happens a lot. So I just thought it helped frame and better understand your work as a as a whole.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I've definitely been thinking about haiku for the last, 25 years. And then, translating it from time to time. This newest collection, Applause for a Cloud, these are poems by Sayumi Kamakura, who's in her 70s, lives outside Tokyo, and she's been writing haiku her whole life. Only haiku, which is common in Japan. But this book was a pleasure, and it did make me sort of think about like the mechanics of haiku and how the images fit together, and the best way to render that in English. And I think a lot of it did rub off on me. In fact, in the Lost novel, there are these multiple choice poems.
Yeah.
And that kind of came out of translating her work. I've known her a long, long time, but coming up with different iterations of her haiku and then seeing them side by side and figuring out which I liked better. And then I thought, wow, these like options like on the page, they kind of look like a little quatrain or poem in themselves. I'm going to try this, I'm going to play with this. And actually Ashbery, he never published it in one of his major books, like it was only a chapbook, but he wrote a multiple choice sequence. You know that? Yeah. So, and I didn't know that when I wrote mine. It was only afterward. His are crazier, I think, than mine.
Well, I thought we could ask you to read a little bit of your own work and maybe also hear some of the translations too. But I do want to hear Thinking of Work, the first poem from the Lost novel.
Sure.
And I just have to say, I noticed that the first poem in each of your own books of poetry has sun in it as an image, has the sun.
I had no idea.
Well, it was
okay.
It just Good came eye. To me. I had to say.
Good eye. Sure, let me read this. Thinking of Work. A brief storm blew the earth clean. There was much to do. Sun to put up, clouds to put out, blue to install, limbs to remove, grass to implant. The grass failed. We ordered new grass. A limb cracked in half in the short storm, short with its feeling. We saw its innards, all the hollow places. Something flew out of the window, and then the window flew out of the window.
So Stevie and I love this poem. And one of the things I was trying to figure out, how do I talk about this thing that happens in a James Shea poem? When the window flies out of the window. It's in your essay to the Routledge Global Haiku Reader. You say, haiku at its best permits a radical negative capability in which the reader begins by perceiving the scene. Upon rereading, we start to make an interpretation based on allusions, wordplay, sound, and form. The scholar, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Haru Shirane?
Oh, Shirane, yeah.
Has written about the need to read haiku on two axes at the same time, the horizontal or literal level and the vertical or interpretive level. And thinking about the window flying out of the window, well, in a storm, there is a horizontal way of reading that. A window could fly out of another window, but there's also this vertical interpretation happening where the frame is kind of folding in on itself and disappearing through its own aperture or something.
Right.
Right. And that happens a lot in your poems where there's this kind of point where the language backs up on itself. I think there's another poem, something like, there's an old saying, there's an old saying. Yeah. Or in the new book, it's hard to stand how still a deer can stand, and there's that wordplay. There is an image you can see in front of you, but I'm just so interested how you think about this. To me, it almost like reversed that. Like instead of reading the horizontal first and then hearing the vertical, I read the vertical first when I read your work. And then I see that, oh yeah, okay, I guess a window could fly out of a window horizontally.
Wow, okay. Well, first of all, I'm the last person to ask these
No, you're the best.
Kenneth Koch cites Picasso saying, he's kind of misquoting him a little bit, but basically he's saying,
poetry, though?
That, an artist shouldn't be one's own connoisseur. because, you're not in the best position. But I think that I do want to create a space for the reader, definitely. Now, when you create too much space, obviously you will lose the reader, and that's the risk. But I'm willing to take those risks, and I like that play to try to see, okay, how much give can there be in a poem, in an image, that contract you make with the reader, that they should stick with you, that there's going to be some connections here that are meaningful. But at the same time, I very much, I'm drawn to work, like Ashbery, I'm drawn to work that is capacious and open, that allows me to sort of dwell in it, to inhabit it, bring my own memories and thoughts to it. I guess I look for those moments, or when I'm writing and I feel like some of that is happening, then I try to lean into that and tease that out further. The best is when you yourself are kind of puzzled. You're puzzled by what you wrote, but you're also drawn to it. Like you kind of like, there's something interesting here, even if I don't quite understand it. And I love those moments. I even have some poems where, even to this day, I'm like, I'm not totally sure what that's about. Yeah. But it has a frisson, it has a kind of pull that I think, makes it hold together. So I myself as a reader, I'm drawn to that kind of work, and I try to maybe create work that reenacts that. And I guess I don't know how. I mean, there's a lot of techniques, I guess. Like one is, the cases you give are where I'm maybe like repeating a word, but in a different way, something like that. And so I guess that's one way to sort of pull the rug out a little bit.
Yeah.
Or reposition the reader, let's say.
But it seems like you're very intentional when you do that, even if you think that you're not, because I've noticed it happens in a lot of moments where it's almost the narrator, I won't say you, because whoever the I is, like, gives a little bit too much of themselves or is too revealing. And so that turn happens to deflect, using humor to
yes.
But really, no, look at this face over here.
Well,
so I think of, like.
In the star on the eye, like in parentheses, I made that up, ! Just, don't worry, it's made up.
Which is something that also carries through who you translate, because I feel like Yam Gong also does that a lot. He does a lot of the deflecting turns. And so I just, again, reading all of your work together is like it's not like a through line. It's almost like a through circle or.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'm drawn to work, like in my translation work, I'm drawn to writers like that, like Yam Gong, even Sayumi is, her haiku are naturally like that. They kind of like create deflection or, and that kind of thing. Usually it's a juxtaposition of two images that create a little electricity. Someone told me once, some more like senior poet said that my poems are a little cold. They meant this as a criticism. And I think what he meant was that, there's a kind of, there's a distance there or a deflection there, and that the reader maybe can't feel like, well, what's the opposite of cold? Warm or something. Mm-hmm. But I actually, I don't know if I would, I don't know if I'd use the word cold, but I do think that on the spectrum, my work could be read as a little cool, but a little cooler, because I think that's what you have to give up in a way to create that space for the reader.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an exchange in a sense.
But even when you do that sometimes, where you do the deflecting, there's then the moment after, like, do you see what I did there? I know that I did that. I know that don't worry about it.
Well, that brings you back. Yeah.
And it does. That's what I mean. Like, and I think too, because I had you for so many classes, that it doesn't sound cold to me. It sounds like you. Because, like, I hear your voice and, like, I don't know. I don't think it makes it seem cold. I think the absurdity. It also just makes sense to me because the classes that I took with you, it was like the James starter pack or the James Journey trademark.
Right.
So I took like my second workshop with you, and then I took translation with you, and then I took radical strategies, which was the avant-garde poets. And then you were also my thesis advisor. So I feel like and my husband's thesis advisor.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
I liked your
You're
poems.
like, I remember so much of it.
No, I do remember. I liked your poems. I mean, you also had a spare style that the reader that had to fill in a lot of, bring a lot to it.
So much,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it spoke to me.
I wonder if we can hear some examples of the translation before we get into the new book of poetry. If you want to choose any from Yamgong or from Applause for a Cloud. Yeah.
Why don't I read just a little from both? I can read, I think I'll read two from Moving a Stones, the selected poems of Yamgong. This is a book I co-translated with Dorothy Tse, and it came out from Zephyr Press 2 or 3 years ago. In fact, we just hosted Yamgong in Boston.
Oh my gosh.
Back in March. He came and did some events. We did a bilingual reading, an audio recording for Harvard's Woodbury Poetry Room. And,
fantastic.
Yeah, and so that'll be archived there. He's also in his 70s. So I will read the two poems here that I think get at what we're talking about a bit. Daily life. I was maybe 4 or 5 when I became seriously ill. In my delirium, a woman from Dongguan wailed for my soul's return. 1 foot of cloth, 1 bowl of water, clothes burning brightly in a brazier at the foot of my bed. My parents walked amid the smoke. Through flickering silhouettes, my worried brothers and sisters spun around my bed like horses on a revolving lantern. I saw my soul following schoolmates from a former life, playing in the river of forgetfulness. Mother said, "You had us scared. Your body was ice cold. The trembling of your nostrils, the only sound. Not until you heard the voice of the sponge cake seller did you open your eyes and smile grimly. And then what, Mother? Then you came to judge the world. We were watching you from far away, and day by day, you recovered."
I love that poem. I love that poem. I'm so glad you read that one.
I have cheeks. I have cheeks, just needing a kiss. I have lips, just needing to kiss. But no matter how my cheeks oblige, no matter how my lips persist, no matter how fast my head spins round, no matter how close they are to each other. I love how the bottom drops out of that poem. So when this was first published in his book, he has a endnote that explains that he was trying to kiss his daughter and she wouldn't let him kiss him, or I think he asked her to kiss him and she wouldn't, and then he said, "Oh, well, I'll have to kiss myself," and he had pretended to kiss himself on the cheek, but he couldn't reach it. But this, I just love how kind of silly and sad and moving and sort of also formally interesting this is. It doesn't complete the thought, so it embodies the failure to kiss yourself.
Well, and the failure to really come to terms with when your kid is no. As a parent, you're like,
right, a little sad. Yeah.
Don't force it. I'm cool.
Oh,
Right.
wow. Well, and then that first poem, I'm obsessed with that moment of then you came to judge the world.
Right.
That the little boy self is judging, and somehow that's what brings him back to life.
Right.
But we don't know what the judgment is in any direction.
Right.
It could be a judgment of disgust with life, and that's what brings him back.
Right. Right.
And I think that's all of your work too.
Yeah, that the speaker experiences the suffering and then suddenly is no longer innocent and sees the world for what it is, the good and the bad.
Which is actually an interesting poem to start with and then go into the other one, because that's kind of what happens when you become the child that's like, no, I'm not going to do that for you.
Yeah.
Because you become aware of things and the relationship shifts and what that can mean in a relationship.
Yes, so in fact, a lot of Yamgong's poetry, not a lot of it, but especially his earlier poems that are in this collection are kind of memories about his childhood, about Hong Kong in the 70s and 80s. But I always think that they're not merely about that. They're also about nostalgia itself and sort of, thinking about.
That's a big part of Sinophone poetry, though, and in and of itself, isn't it? Because like the whole political turmoil and the change when the People's Republic of China came in. And so like there's always a looking back in a lot of the Hong Kong poetry.
Well, so he's sometimes considered, in that generation that was like the first self-identified Hong Kong poetry generation, where like previously he was born in Hong Kong, whereas previously poets were, they immigrated to Hong Kong from mainland China, and so their relationship to the city was a bit different. But yeah, he grew up speaking Cantonese, and so there's a lot of Cantonese slang in his poetry as well.
So you co-translated this with Dorothy.
Yes.
And she is a native speaker of Cantonese, correct?
Yes.
So how did that work? How does translating with someone who is a native speaker of it, when you yourself are not, like how does that work together? Or they're also a fiction writer and you're a poetry writer. So how does that come into it?
And we're also married.
Oh, yes.
That's probably the biggest factor.
Well, and her novel is fabulous too.
Thinking about that and like the relationship of co-translating and with your partner, no less. This is going to sound so silly, but there's a children's series, a Japanese children's series called Sato the Rabbit. And it is co-translated in English by a husband and wife. And she's from Japan and he isn't. And so I was reading their interview on how they do it. And so it's just made me really curious about how it works together, how it complicates things, who is there like somebody that has their hands in it more and then the other person's just kind of there to help?
Or do you have clashing judgments over a word?
Well, I can tell you the biggest clash, if you want to call it that, was actually over writing the introduction than the translation. Because the introduction, we realized that there was almost nothing written about Yamgong in English. So we felt a little pressure that this introduction would be sort of the first and, well, we hope not only, but could be one of the only treatments of his work. And so we felt a lot of pressure, like, what are we going to put in it? What are we going to leave out? And we had to kind of, really carefully negotiate that. But in terms of the poems, generally speaking, she would translate a sort of rough literal version. And then I would, review that and have a bunch of questions, alternate phrasings. And then we would get together and go line by line through the poem and figure out the best options for different lines and how it fit together. Occasionally we would have to go to Yamgong himself and ask him a few questions, and he was very gracious. He also gave us a very free hand. He never, said, oh, it should be like this or that. He basically said, you can do whatever you'd like to do. But it was a very iterative process in the sense that we just kept doing draft after draft after draft. Then there was also a part where we would show it to people that we trusted, people who knew Chinese, but also people who didn't, to see what their impressions were. And we probably translated almost 100 poems, but there's, I think, less than 50 in the book. So sometimes we would get halfway through a poem and realize it's just not going to work. He has a poem where Donald Trump is speaking Cantonese, and we couldn't do it. Or it was a poem that was doing something that another poem was doing, and so
it wasn't necessary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it took quite a few years to complete the project. It wasn't like it was something we would do on the side, like after dinner or something.
You kind of answer this in your essay in the Haiku Reader, but like your decision to include the originals next to the translation.
Right.
Why did you do that? Or what was your reasoning behind it?
We felt that was important, and that's a key reason why we worked with Zephyr Press, because they're known for their bilingual editions of poetry.
Okay.
And they've done other Hong Kong poets and Chinese poets as well, also in bilingual editions. And then with the Black Ocean book, Applause for a Cloud, that's also bilingual. And I suggested it, and the publisher had no problem accommodating that. I just think that today, especially, it's important to present the original language if you can, even if most readers are not going to be able to work with it. Some people will know the original language, and so it's helpful there. But also formally, you can see what it looks like. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's quite distinctive to see the single-line Japanese haiku in the Kamakura collection side by side with the 3-line English versions to indicate to readers, well, actually, these are 1 line.
Yeah, let's hear a few
I
of
was
those.
going to ask about that,
Okay.
but we'll go.
Why don't I read a few of these haiku by Sayumi Kamakura? Once in a while, I'll read the Japanese, so you can hear it. Mugi no aki, ohayo kara konbanwa made. Harvesting wheat from good morning until good evening. The silence of a 2-year-old, the shape of marshmallows. The number of clouds returns to 1. Summer continues. Hikunami ni hagu ga sarete yuku kai no yume. Dreams of a clam, torn away in the undertow. Summer's over, mutters a goblin in the tree crotch. In a field of mustard flowers, just a few ways for the light to return home. Tsukiakari, yane kara, eda e, mado e, me e. Under moonlight from a rooftop, toward a branch, a window, an eye. The lice gather stickily in the afternoon. Hikidashi no naka de wa, uta o hochikisu. Inside a drawer, a stapler singing away. Byoin ga higasu no shita ni toku chisaku. A hospital under an umbrella, far and small. As refreshing as the trans and transients. To be cured with the ease of clouds breaking. Gogo niji gofun banana o mugeba ropun ni. 2:05 p.m. If I peel this banana, it's 2:06. Honto wa futatsu kamo, natsu no taiyo. Actually, it could be 2 things. A summer sun. 5 peiji kara 10 peiji made. Mugi, mugi, mugi. From page 5 to page 10. Wheat, wheat, wheat. First morning of the new year. To complete the scene, let's add a pinch of salt.
Thank you so much. I would love to talk about your new book of poems, Last Day of My Face. And Stevie and I were just talking about loving, Star in the Eye so many years ago now. And this book is just incredible, and we're so grateful for it. There's several ways in. I think one thing I wondered about was maybe the title and the titles of all your books seem to take, and maybe this is a haiku thing too, a big expanse, star, or even the idea of a novel.
The Last Day.
Yes, The Last Day, and bring it close to us on the scale of the human. And even the lost novel would be like in front of your face, or the star is in the eye. And this book is Last Day of My Face. And there's all these kind of figures in a field, is often an image, a person in a field. And I guess we can just start hearing them if you don't want to respond to that.
No, happy to.
Can you read the first poem?
Sure.
And here's another sun, a sun broker.
That's right. Sun broker. Lifeguards can't save themselves from their own wasting. What's my record of attending to the world? A mute pool in winter. Is wisdom efficient? The sun's beams reach the patio in a tie. What I need is a continuous ray of light at my side, a chance to make up for the luxury of not understanding.
That's so good.
Well, we have all these like huge ideas: wisdom, continuous ray of light.
Well, if we talk about it as far as like at arm's length and then bringing it towards you. I feel like your first very like start in the I and the last novel, and the title for this one is My Face. And I did feel like this collection, more than your other two, centered you a lot more, or the speaker a lot more. Like you were willing to reveal more or talk about yourself more than like deflecting or using the language to turn things. It felt much more centered and focused in this.
That's interesting.
Well, yeah, I have another thought. Stevie, I knew we were going to try to impress you as good students, but it also seems to be more in relation to other people. Like just from that opening line, lifeguards can't save themselves. You know, it's a self-investigation, but in relation to others and the world, more open. And there's so many more emergencies and alarms than this sort of more restful poems of the earlier books.
Right.
Even the last poem, I mean, the title.
Well, we'll get there, but okay, wait. Okay. Respond to us or I'll prompt you to read another poem about alarms.
Well, no, I mean, I think what you're saying resonates. It did take me, as I was mentioning, you know, it's been 10 years since the lost novel, and these poems have been marinating for a long time, and some of them came from like different pockets of time within those 10 years. I think the manuscript clicked together during the pandemic when I was writing some poems to sort of complete the book. But now that you mention it, yeah, there is probably more of a semi-stable self throughout, like in terms of the speakers in the poems, and there's maybe more sort of conversations going on with other figures. And so in that sense, maybe there's, more of a sense of connection, or more of a presence, it seems, perhaps, at least sort of the speaker sticking around longer in the poem, let's say. That seems fair to me.
Well, let's hear another poem.
Fresh report. I'm here in the disaster area, the prescribed zone of the disaster. So for those of you not here, please be assured that you are not experiencing a disaster, for only those in the radius of the disaster can anyone be said to be suffering from the disaster.
Could you go right into reading Archangel? Because I think those poems are connected in some way.
Yeah. Archangel. I spoke against the circumference around me, but I was unheard of. When it came to the masters, I was unread. They didn't read me. I hope to make a good companion out of myself after I'm dead.
Well, in both of those poems, we have a perimeter, sort of like a window, and we do have it flying out of itself in some way at the end. But what else can we say about it?
Actually, in both of these, the speaker's kind of the same from the beginning to the end. In fact, the first one is like a continuous sentence. The second one, not, but it's, what can we say?
Well, I do feel that how I had said before, like when you repeat things and you turn them slightly, like I was unread, they had not read me. This time it doesn't feel like a deflection. This time it feels to me like you want to make sure the person understands what you're saying. Like you're restating it for them in a way that they'll understand it rather than confuse them or push them away from it. So I feel like almost the devices that you have used throughout your writing, those are turning a little bit and are doing different things in the way that you use them. Well done.
I mean, I guess I'm glad to hear. I mean, I do feel in this book I was trying to do things that I hadn't done before. I do feel like it's important for myself to write against myself, if you know what I mean. Like, not to just do the same thing. And that's, for example, partly where the last poem comes from is trying to do something.
Do we want to spend the time to hear the last poem? Because I just think it's incredible. There's several things that happen in it that I think speak to everything we've been we've been talking about. It might take a good 10 minutes or so, right? I don't know.
Yeah, it could. It could. But we can try. Yeah, we can go for it.
Maybe
Yeah.
before you start, I wanted to ask, I was thinking about it this morning and I reread Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror.
Oh, wow.
Where Ashbery is describing how every picture you make of yourself is distorted. You can't make an undistorted picture and it would be bulging out or distort, having a hand in front of it. But this is a failed self-portrait.
Right.
This is, again, a negation, sort of like those earlier poems you read from this book of speaking against the circumference, against the perimeter. There's something happening that is a different type of footnote on the supposed process of autobiography.
Right. Well, at some point, I don't know when, the title sort of emerged. And once I discovered the title, it was quite liberating. Because then you can put anything into the poem.
Right.
And you don't need to worry because it's not a success. And that was an interesting moment for me. But yes, absolutely. Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror was definitely on my mind. And yeah, Ashbery was definitely on the brain. Failed self-portrait. She smiles in parts, has a story she can only tell the first sentence of. 1. I've made a sort of makeshift sense of ourselves, cohabitating with the cranes on the windward side of the river, coming in waves, often in pairs, settling in a few inches of water, thoughts scattering upon the sky, crepuscular firmament, recognizing myself too late in its disappearance. Still, it's kind and sweet to think I outlive this moment, even if only for a moment. Diminished wing, dead pine in my apartment. Looking out the window, waiting to renew a thought unreturned, I imagine the totality of the grandest canyon, so untouched, there's no need to return. Here, women have been known to go into deepest mourning for their own relatives, or those of their husbands, or for people perhaps whom they have never seen, and have remained for 7 or 10 years constantly in black. Then, on losing a child or a relative dearly loved, they have no extremity of dress left to express the real grief. Outside my apartment, I see 2 women showering in the blue light of a second-story window. I should continue walking, but I want to watch discreetly, accept this invitation from life. It's the nature of profanity to weaken a bit as it goes. 1 or 2 raindrops are enough to claim it's raining. You pick me up from work, smiling inside your mouth, leaving pieces of me all over. In the passenger seat, in the alleyways, among the cattails. In the yard, an invisible giant kicks up leaves in his wake, brushing treetops and tree sides with his shoulders, undulating branches, a tree in the wind, a stand-up drunk. Sturdy ladybug, a thimble-sized turtle with personality. An antelope. Don't look up yet. Now. You've startled him away. 2. I want to set life apart and examine it, consider its particulars, but I am swept up. Your turning of these pages blows a wind upon me. I feel moved by a small car. The urge to make love indiscriminately seems understandable. I've always enjoyed the architecture of good times. Tomorrow is a partial and promised gift. On a highway in Iowa, I hurtle over a turtle at 75 miles per hour. It survives my Passover. A woman may wear mourning all her life if she chooses, but it is a question whether in so doing she does not injure the welfare and happiness of the living. A mistake at the party leads me to introduce myself to you. Kindness at first glance. I speak of hope, but never with a grin. A glass possesses the light. No, the light passes through the glass, whereby the glass admits the light. Someone lies to the police about me. It's just me and my suitcase. I run out. The sirens sound. The bird calls fall silent. And then I really run out. I approach a man-made lake, my shirt tails blowing ahead of me. Anarchist in the Capitol, sleeping inside their offices, bound in cuffs. The management of the hands and company seems to embarrass young people greatly. This comes from the false modesty which induces them to suppose they are the observed of all observers. Don't be alarmed. I hold no answers, only secrets. 3. Everything is happenstance. That is, an instance of happening. There's so much mist, fog, low clouding, that the mountains haven't quite revealed themselves utterly yet, and may never do so. A couple of times I swear there's been part of a cloud passing at my feet. Ascending a mountain is usually triumphant, but when the view is obscured and you have to start looking inward, it feels less like a victory. My necklace drags attention to my chest. We sit in the warm interior of an old restaurant. It's desolate in a good way. Does my dress make you look bad? My admixture of humor and seriousness. I'm one with whatever. I'm not saying you should do bad things. I'm saying if you don't put yourself into situations in which you could do bad things, you'll never know if you're really good or not. We'd met amid the coin and laundry. My spotlight turns on itself. A couple of folks looking at their shoes. I know you to be more emotionally nimble than me, but less sure of it. This gives me a thin advantage. In your eyes, even the moon is not bright, nor the stars pure. It's my opportunity for tears. I mount a mirror to my front bumper, so I'm always driving into myself. They say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes, so you can't see where you're going. Ah, the loyalty of my breaths, one following upon another. Small tufts of snow blowing in circles, mostly leftward with the wind, also downward. 4. Soldiers walk in a field set with mines, walking each in each other's footsteps, exactly in each footstep. The lake rewrites itself in the wind. The state says, hello. Cameras watching cameras. I walk under unlit street lamps, bringing the thought of cars turning without warning. The other side of the state of things. Streets amiss with rain. Quiet as a stationery store, I redream the past into an area where I have some authority. I wondered once as a boy at the dark shadow inside a woman's blouse when she bent down, thinking it must be a hole in her chest. My failures take many forms, not easily summarized. They begin as a kind of homelessness of the mind. I am sober lonely, watching sunlight play against the day's things. I'm not one to shout down the wind. I know my place alongside the rivers and cliffs. Oh, to write a moderately long sentence that begins in my mind and ends in yours. 5. I wait on the sun to stir you into me. Backlit night sky, creatures drawn on the early maps of stars. One kind of constellation implicit inside another. It's quiet for billions of miles. Templates of planets found within granite, the interior life of a landscape. There is a false shame, which is the very reverse of true modesty. It has often proved fatal to the social qualities of some who have been otherwise singularly well adapted, not only to receive from society, but to bestow upon it both distinction and happiness. I clean my room until I no longer recognize myself. I take off my complicated socks. 6. Could this be a half-feeble attempt to break into my apartment? The guy outside my door half knocking, half prying it open? Could it be that I'm talking to him now, keeping him at bay while I call the police? Could I be the walking widow, the widow who knows no windows, the windowless widow, the widow of wonderment? I go fishing, get caught up in the waves, keeping me a part of something greater than a relationship, a warm animal in my lap. I like living on the road. War gets its seed in the home. I often describe love as trying to draw on a bird. Tree of cold, solve this intimacy. On your blouse, half flowers akimbo. What has lasted? Overpass, overpass, bleak bright sun, solve this intimacy. 7. We break up in a small restaurant, TV in the corner above our heads like a little angel. I step out to vomit in the corporate shrubbery. I want to get outside myself, like a white van cradling its dent through the streets. Toward the end, one detail reveals itself as not matching up with the continuity of the whole, causing me to wonder about the veracity of the entire enterprise. Yet I continue to listen, waiting for the conclusion to satisfy my wish for the tale to be true. Once the trapdoor existed, I'd fly through it. I know heat lightning is a myth. It's a storm too far away to hear. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. I have a number of reservations under my name. 8. Due to my left-winged thinking, I fall down and type from the fetal position. I still have our secret friend career, kept with the wherewithal of a beehive. Bound to fail in the sense that all that's bound will fail, I look back at my origins. A mouse without bone structure, a flight of needles from a tree, a wish to put my hand through the computer. I keep breaking what is broken, as if to find the part unbreakable. 9. At my office in the city park, I meet a cemetery gardener. God's best viewed, he says, in extremely close proximity. Review the elm tree, measure it against other natural acts. Assess the daffodil. I listen to the clouds whispering themselves apart. Often, I am not permitted to return to a meadow. If the depth of acknowledgement of one's failings measures success, then I am winning in the oddest way. It's not easy to understand silence, to gather ice cream in the morning. Life's a long self-introduction that ends abruptly. Take this gray dandelion. I feel like my tattoo has more personality than I do. Remember the days when boys were named Montgomery? I'm sitting at home, staring at things, wondering why they are not you. I count molecules until I fall asleep, until there's no dream, no evidence. I never sleep to the sound of myself awake. I never saw a loon on the lake, a hawk swooping down. I putter around until dinner time. In the city, I asked for directions, and those 3 girls were so eager, sputtering instructions one by one, looking this way and that, confirming and contradicting. It's my scooter on the wet pavement. Rain falls onto my goggles and helmet. I drive near trucks and curbs. I'm there. I belong everywhere in general. I'd rather not respond right now. When I need to speak, I will, succinctly and full of sincerity. I'd rather ramble into the fictions. People are dying before I can even get to them.
Well, I just want to cheer hearing this poem. It's so good.
It's even better out loud.
It really is. And I want to ask a couple things about it. You're playing with, as you say, confirming and contradicting. So sometimes, you're saying, I'm not one to shout down the wind, where the speaker earlier in the book does shout against the circumference around it. There's this weird, I think of it as almost like a Christian theme of kind of winning and glory or winning through failure, but then contrasted with maybe a more, this is, generalization here, but maybe a more Eastern. And you have this incredible negation of Robert Duncan's poem. You say, often I am not permitted to return to a meadow. He says, often I am permitted to return to a meadow as if it were a given property of the mind that certain bounds hold against chaos. that is a place of first permission, everlasting omen of what is. Is this because you think there are no bounds to the chaos, or or help me here?
Well, first of all, yeah, that's a beautiful poem, of course, by Duncan. Again, I sort of defer to others here, but I don't think I think I'm not trying to make claims.
Yeah.
I think that's in some ways arguably, well, one of the things maybe the poem is sort of interested in is that the failure of making claims, or how the claims collapse as soon as you make it. And therefore, you're in this kind of negative space, but not necessarily negative in the sense that it's not nihilistic, I don't think. But I mean, maybe it's a kind of negative capability, or ars negativa, but it's to me a place that's sort of like maybe pregnant with possibilities, and trying to create that and sustain that was interesting to me. What might seem like a failure on the surface is this weird, I don't know, opportunity or kind of moment of reflection, let's say.
Well, you said that when you came up with the title, it took the pressure off. Did you come up with the title while writing the poem, or did you complete the poem and then you did the title?
No, I don't know exactly, but it came like as I was writing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I started writing it, I wasn't sure, even though, and then it sort of emerged in the process of writing it. I mean, very often I think of my titles last.
Same with, that's what I do, so I was interested to see if...
But not in this case. Not in this case.
So it almost helped direct or provide direction to how you were...
Yeah. Definitely. It's at some point it sort of clicked in that way and became a little kind of a permission structure to write it out.
Did you know it was going to be long, do you think, or did that surprise you?
Yeah, I think as I was getting into it, I realized that this could be something substantial in terms of the length, and that interested me too.
Well, there's another line from it. I keep breaking what has broken, as if to find the part unbreakable. And you talk about in the Routledge Haiku Reader about someone's idea of art is to make stone stony, to make you experience the stone in its qualities or something. But I don't know what it is in your in your work, because it's like, is it consciousness? Is it this like just any idea somebody has about life, or something that you are, very open, right? Kind of rejecting everything, seeing its failures. But maybe disgust isn't the right word that I used earlier. But it's not acceptance either.
Well, I would say, like you taught that one part where he talks about remembering being a child and seeing and thinking it was a hole in the chest. Mm-hmm. That kind of like for the whole poem, though, I kind of heard a child's voice. I know that these are big topics, and a lot of the epiphanies or things that you're processing are bigger images or bigger concepts, but it reminded me of a child, as in children give themselves a leeway that adults do not give themselves when they're processing things. Do you know what I mean? So like the trying to keep breaking until trying to find the unbreakable thing, that's almost like that whole thing where kids, your own children, will beat the living shit out of you just to prove that you won't break and that you'll keep coming back to them, sort of thing. And that is what that reminds me of. It's like the creation of
a self. Yeah.
Yes, that's what.
Which
that
has a hole at the center of it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. No, I do think that consciousness or continuousness interests me. If you know what I mean, like it's
but it
weird.
Never seems like the same it's not like continuous in the way of continuity. It's like a cycle almost, but things change a little bit each time, and that's what your poetry feels like it's doing or exploring. I could be wrong.
Well, it's such a I don't know how to talk about it, because it's sometimes it's a feeling of ecstasy, sometimes it's a feeling of falling through a trap door.
Right.
And maybe those are the same thing. There's a line in the Lost Novel, I think, something elegiac or reversals are always elegiac or something. And, there's a sadness just to any passage of time. So I'm kind of in that place too.
Yeah. I think there's a line like that.
Or maybe that's on this book.
In here. Reversals are inherently elegiac or something like that. Let me see.
Oh yeah, it's in this book. And
there's
page 23. I don't know how you say that. Saccades.
Yeah, saccade.
Something inherently elegiac about reverses.
Well, I mean, I think that is arguably a through line through my 3 books. Is kind of like, I think, this sort of elegiac imagination, like to sort of meditate, almost like a memento mori or something. Like you're kind of thinking about, let's say you're thinking about death, but then how does that sort of animate you as well? It's paradoxical, or make one create, let's say. That tension is very interesting to me. That could be a through line through my work, or even just like the strange, morbid kind of humor that emerges sometimes. I think can kind of come from that way of thinking, let's say.
I wonder if we could end with having you read Soft Tank, also from this new book, which I think continues some of these themes too.
Sure. Soft Tank. I dub everything in my own voice. My mouth never matches perfectly with what I am saying. I'm sorry. Life can be lifelike if you like life. The winner in the winner circle is always the circle itself. Can't see that star in the sky? It's like someone left a flashlight on in the bottom drawer. Last night, it rained inside a mall. There's very little crime here, but there could be a war.
The life can be lifelike if you like life reminded me of Opening on the Dance Floor in Star in the Eye.
Oh, yeah.
The rearranging of words and how it can change what it means.
Right. There's that reversal again.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is inherent in the Japanese language, and so it also makes sense to me that you do that. Or not even like the playfulness of words in Japanese and how it can mean more than one. Like how cloud, the word for cloud, and spider are the same thing. And I have that conversation with my husband all the time about like, how do you know what somebody's talking about? It's all about context. And so changing the context of something to play with it. You're like, no.
No. Well, was it Richard Howard? Someone said prose precedes and verse reverses. So when you write a line of verse, like you go back to the start. I mean, this is like verse and field, and and Stein has an essay, Poetry and Grammar, where she talks about why she likes to write in lines, why she likes poems. And she says it's like being in love and you want to say your lover's name again and again. You want to just kind of like repeat and go back and say it and start over. And so, yeah, there's a weird, I guess for me, there's a weird pleasure in these repetitions or this recasting. And yeah, I guess maybe I'm drawn to that a little bit.
Well, I do want to just say thank you, James, for being here. This is such a cool full circle moment for us, and we hope it was an okay moment for you.
It was fantastic. This is fantastic, and I'm honored to be on your podcast and to talk to you guys. I mean, to know that what we talked about in class, you still remember, and that you're both still writing, and I just feel like, yeah, very honored. So thank you very much.
You can check out books by James Shea here at the library in our podcast collection, where we have books by all of our past podcast guests. We'll put links in the show notes. A big thank you to my colleague Stevie Noguchi and to James for coming up to the library to record and for all the inspiration over the years, whether you knew it or not. And that's our show. Thank you for listening to our 67th interview episode. Comments and feedback are always welcome and can be sent to podcast@deerfieldlibrary.org. And of course, we always appreciate a review and rating. Go to deerfieldlibrary.org/podcast to learn more about our show and find links to subscribe. You can also follow the library on all social media channels or check out our YouTube channel. Links are on our website or in the show notes. We'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.